A lot of athletes get great despite the coaching that they get, right? When I'm talking from the ground level, even up to some, big fight gyms.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to OGs of the Soy. I'm extremely honored to have Mr. Eric Uresk here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming on, bro. You've been through a lot in the last couple of days.
Yeah. It's been an eventful few days, but had the appendix taken out on Thursday last week. So what is it, Tuesday? So just a couple of days ago. But a lot moving around, doing my thing. I'm back already coaching the guys over at Tiger.
Amazing.
The past couple of days.
So thanks for coming on. I mean, no one would have blamed you for not making it.
Sure.
And of course, probably not the holiday that you expected.
No. But I've been traveling for the past 3 months. So it's less of a holiday and more of just the living abroad for a bit.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. So with all kind of guests that come on here, I do ask them, how did you first hear about / come to Thailand and specifically Phuket? Because you're a very well-known character from around here. A lot of people, even people on the show, have spoken about you as well, Eric. Of course, all very good things. And so, yeah, you've definitely got history here, right? So,
yeah, no, absolutely. So I grew up in Long Island, New York, and 2 kids that I coached in youth freestyle wrestling went on to have their own MMA careers. They were actually the original coaches at Phuket Top Team, the Leone brothers.
Oh, awesome.
Okay, Anthony and Andrew were essentially from the same hometown.
And now they're the Bali MMA guys.
Yeah.
Right?
So as they were making their departure to Bali, I inquired just around the time they were getting ready to leave, and turned out Phuket Top Team needed a fitness, strength, and conditioning coach and a wrestling coach. And so I walked into both those roles as they were exiting, and that was it. That was in the summer of 2014.
Oh, yeah. And had you been to Phuket before? Or?
Never.
No.
Nope.
You just got word there was a job.
Yeah, I was having a hard time getting fights in America at the time, and so I was like, all right, I'm gonna try this out, and it just felt like the move. I prior to this have moved across country in America several times just off gut feeling. So moving across the world on a gut feeling wasn't really much of a stretch for me. I've never been a person that has a hard time just leaving everything and just going on a whim to chase some adventure. And so this was just another.
And you meet a lot of those kind of people on this road, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
We're all like that.
Yeah.
To some degree.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I mean, for you then, coming here in 2014, that's 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how different was this road?
Man, it's pretty astonishing how much it's grown and just how big Phuket has gotten, and how it's changed massively. I mean, God, we used to have to like hide going to get weed at the reggae bar for people, and now you can walk 10 feet and get it pretty much every 10 feet and run into a weed store here. So that, even just that alone is crazy. But I think just the scene here has exploded.
When you came, was it just Tiger and Top Team?
Tiger and Top Team were the 2 major gyms, with AKA coming along somewhere in that time frame as well. Even though I don't really think AKA is much of a fight team anymore. I don't know what they have going on. I don't really hear too much about what they have going on anymore. But it was Phuket Top Team, and Tiger. Phuket Fight Club at the time was really just more of a Muay Thai gym. It was Leo, who I believe is still there, had a stable of Muay Thai fighters, and he was bringing along a lot of Brazilian kids from the ground up and putting out some really good Muay Thai fighters there. But there wasn't even really an MMA club. Awesome,
man. It's great to hear people talk about those days and how much it has. It's like kind of steroids now, right? Like there's gyms everywhere. There's people everywhere. It's like a different world.
It is a different world, and it's one of those things that I think it's easy to look at. I don't know what I would call the those real golden years, I think, because even people that I know that come back to Phuket today, I think consider those times like this more of like the golden age of Phuket. And now, now obviously there's Bang Tao, and there's a whole scene, and it's more all over the island than just the soy. But I think just because I'm older and I'm after different things in life than I used to. If I would just cared about training, like this place would be just as magical to me, I think, as it once was, but I'm married. I've got, my career and stuff like that. And so I coach and work with fighters, but I'm not like a young, hungry fighter anymore. So, as an older guy, it's just a different experience for me. I've changed. And so my experience of the island is different now.
Awesome. And let's just talk about then that young, hungry fighter that you once was. Yeah. How was that fight career for you? How did you get into it in the first place?
Yeah. So, I stumbled into wrestling. I went to like 4 different high schools. I was getting in a lot of trouble at the first high school that I went to. After the first year, decided to switch high schools. They had a wrestling team, so I'm going to give that a try. I was getting in a lot of trouble already. And wrestling definitely gave me an outlet. And I was in love with it right away. And I took to it pretty naturally. I had a pretty natural talent for it. Once I realized, like, I started wrestling around with some of my dad's friends one day, and I was like throwing these guys around, and I was a little tiny teenager, like 145 pounds, so 66 kilo. And I was like, oh man, I can use this in the street. So then I was already getting into trouble, but I started using it. I was basically like beating up and robbing drug dealers, suplexing them on blacktop and putting them out cold and leaving them for dead, and just taking their shit and going about my business. And so for me, I was always into fighting. I was always a real violent kid, and this just kind of gave me something. On top of that, I saw the first UFC in 1993 on a video cassette that my cousin had gotten, and it was a copy of a cassette. And once I was like, I'm going to do that one day. And I was just obsessed with it. I would literally cut school, or was dropped out. I was dropped out of school, and I would go back into the school to use the computer lab so I could look up martial arts. I was just obsessed with it. It's like I didn't have anything else.
What city are you from?
I'm from Long Island, New York. So,
okay.
So yeah.
Is that that's the heart of New York?
So Long Island is just outside of New York City.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a big fish-looking island that's like just next to Manhattan. So Brooklyn and Queens are actually on Long Island, and then there's Nassau and Suffolk counties. I'm from Suffolk County. Big wrestling hotbed, and so wrestling was like the first avenue that I had into martial arts training. And I was just using it in the street, just beating people up, robbing people, and kind of making a way for myself. I was my home life was really tumultuous and violent in itself. I spent a lot of time homeless as a teenager and living on the streets and in and out of rehabs and jails and psych wards and all that type of stuff. And even when I would get sent away, I would get books sent to me I was just obsessed with martial arts. So I'd read books on judo. I would read all these magazines, and it's just something that gave me hope. Like, for a kid that was pretty hopeless, like I was in real bad shape, and my drug addiction was just out of control, and my behavior was out of control. And I don't think too many people expected me to live past 20. That would have been pretty ambitious at the time. So, but martial arts was just a thing. I was like, man, this thing is incredible. Like, I was just really enamored by it. And every time I would try to get sober, I was pursuing a wrestling career. So I was driving into Brooklyn 5 days a week to train with these Russian guys that were really high-level Greco-Roman wrestlers. And I was just doing whatever I could to get the best training that I could. And fast forward, I fought in some underground fights. I fought Frankie Edgar in an underground fight.
How did that go?
I lost, but it was a pretty wild back and forth fight. I actually broke his eye socket. He spoke about this on a interview recently, And he had to go to the hospital afterwards. But yeah, I mean, it was Frankie Edgar. I think he ended up like ground and pounding me and TKOing me. But there was some good shots traded.
I mean, this was it early 2000s?
Early 2000s.
Around then, obviously, MMA was very new. It was cage fighting back then, right?
Well, no, this was in a illegal boxing gym.
Okay.
Like there was no doctors. This was like underground.
Okay.
Yeah, there was no rules.
No rules.
Yeah, no rules at all.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was that quite like a popular thing back then?
It was not legal in New York. So
Oh, really?
if you wanted to turn pro, you could turn pro in New Jersey and get fights in Jersey. But yeah, in New York, there was no sanctioned fighting.
Wow.
So there was this underground combat league and all, there was a few other, illegal, fighting organizations where they would just set up these fights. I mean, dude, I've seen guys get their arms broken and just basically like put out in the back of an alley and left to go fix it on their own and stuff like that.
Wow. It's an eye-opener.
Yeah.
I mean, especially for athletes in today's world.
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially we're just fighting for the love. Like if you're from my generation of fighter, which is pretty early on, right? So a lot of us that started in the early 2000s, there's a good chance you probably ended up paying out of pocket to fight professionally. There's a good chance you went and fought to have enough gas money to drive home, have a nice meal, and buy your friends a couple of beers or something like that. There's a good chance you made no money. Promoters were a lot of scumbag promoters and guys that didn't give a fuck, and you just wanted to fight. And so you fought because you wanted to fight, and there was not really like much of a future in it at the time. It was just something that you were either obsessed with or you weren't. So yeah, and I moved on. Like, I ended up going out to Las Vegas. I ended up started training at Mark Lehman's Cobra Kai, which guys like Kendall Grove were training there at the time, and a couple of like pretty big name UFC guys were training there. And then I got brought over to Extreme Couture. This is when Randy was still fighting, actually, and got they watched me work out, and they're like, all right, yeah, you can train with us. And so I became part of the team there. And man, it was a wild times. I mean, you're talking about any given day in the gym, we'd have Vanderlei in there, we'd have Forrest in there, Randy would be in there getting ready for fights. We had Vitor Belfort would be in the gym. Like, all these guys would be in the gym at one time.
And at that time, like, the training methodologies was go as hard as you can, right?
It was a fight pretty much every day.
There was no like, you're in your rest period and today's a soft day and tomorrow's a hard day.
No, every day was pretty hard.
Yeah. The science hadn't hit it yet, basically.
No, not at all. No, we were having fist fights in there. And then I spent some time with Alliance MMA. I spent the bulk of my career with Alliance MMA and head coach Eric Del Fiero, and training with guys like Dominic Cruz and Ross Pearson, and Joey Beltran, and Brandon Vera, Phil Davis, Mike Chandler. We had a real great stable in that gym too. So I spent a lot of time at some top flight gyms, and super talented, really tough in the gym, mentally pretty weak though. Like, I was a bully, bully, physically pretty gifted. Didn't really want to work on I just wanted to win in the gym. I was so mentally fragile. Like, I needed to win in the gym. I couldn't handle, I'm going to work on this skill today and probably not have a good day in the gym. Right? That just was not something that I could do. And so it cost me, like, I didn't feel confident to take risks in matchmaking. And, I don't know that fighting was actually something I was ever meant to do. I think probably if I could go back and do it all over again, I probably would have done like grappling, and taken jiu-jitsu really seriously. And I think I would have enjoyed that. And I think that would have been more suitable for me. Or maybe I was just mentally weak at the time and it's just something that I needed to work through. And I started to really acknowledge that towards the end of my career, that I spent a good portion of my fight career really fighting like a coward. Like, if it wasn't easy, I would fall apart. And that was, kind of a tough thing to look in the mirror and like say that to yourself, but it was the most honest thing to me. And I had to have that conversation with myself. And I started adjusting my training accordingly, but I was already in my my mid-30s at the time.
Would you say, like, you went down that avenue because you didn't have the kind of guidance, or that kind of...
Yeah, well, so I grew up in a house where making a mistake meant you were going to be berated and told what a piece of shit you are, right? So that was my belief system. My belief system was that it's not safe to make mistakes. And the only reason people like me is because I can fight. And so I always felt the pressure of, if I lose, even in practice, I have no reason to like myself. Because the only reason people like me is because I can fight. Because, in as a kid, that's what got me attention, was that I could beat people up, and like I didn't have a problem, even as like a little 10-year-old. Like, I remember being in a fight with another 10-year-old kid and like consciously deciding to snap his finger in half while he was like looking at me crying, like to not do it. But there was all these older kids around me cheering, and like, sorry, bro, fuck your finger. But like, I need to feel what these older guys are going to give me after I break you, And so that's really what I was addicted to. I was addicted to that feeling. I was addicted to that kind of respect that you get on the street when you can hurt people.
I mean, martial arts always does say that, it humbles people.
It can. It can. Well, it did. Ultimately, it did. Right?
In the end.
In the end. And it took a process. And I wish I had. And that's why it became so important to me to coach from that place. Because I wish somebody would have sat me down and helped me work through my ego. My coach, Eric Uresk, he's, him and I kind of go back and forth on this, and he's a big proponent that the ego can drive people to greatness, right? And I believe that. I have evidence of it. I've seen it do that for people. It can also really hinder greatness. It depends how the person learns how to use the ego. My ego was one that wouldn't allow me to confront my fears, right? Whereas you get a guy like Dominic's ego had him not be able to not confront his fears. Like, he had to do the hardest thing he could to himself every day. And that's why he was great. That's why he was a Hall of Famer, because he did that, right? For me, my ego would shut down. I didn't know how to get to that place with my ego, right? So I wish I had somebody to sit me down and
give you that ability to channel it.
Yeah. And it would have, would I have received it? Who knows, right? I learned the lesson when I learned the lesson, and I said, all right, it's too late for me, but I'll be damned if I let somebody else make that mistake without me at least giving them some type of awareness around it so they can make a choice for themselves.
Mm-hmm. I think, a lot of fighters... I mean, I come from a rugby background where from 16 years old, you are like cuddled, basically. Yeah. I was on protein shakes. I was on gym routines. I was, we were set up for success in academies. MMA, there's nothing, even to this day, really, until you become like a local champion, and then, managers come and sponsorships come, but there's absolutely nothing. And that's even worse at the level of like, having a mentor, other than your coach, which... These days, coach has got 10 other athletes to work with. You're not just the one special kid in the gym anymore. And of course, every fighter wants to go to gyms where there's loads of other good fighters around as well. So you're not the special kid. So then you just don't get that kind of guidance, and they can't give you it because there's too much work. Yeah. So it's not the coach's fault. But there's nobody else replacing that in combat for sure.
Absolutely, right? So one, I think a lot of coaches are not suited to have that conversation. They may be able to point it out in the best way they can. Can they bring an athlete through that? Possibly. The other thing to your point is, I think this is true of a lot of sports. The coaching in general in MMA, even from a technical standpoint, and this, I don't want this to be there's a lot of bad coaching, right? There's a lot of coaching that isn't a lot of athletes get great despite the coaching that they get, right? When I'm talking from a ground level, even up to some, big fight gyms, guys that are going to be great no matter what, right? But it is possible to make a difference with the right coaching, right? The right coaching can make a difference, right? If the person so it's like the coaching's got to be there and the person has to want to receive the coaching. So like both those things have to be in place.
Yeah.
And you can make some fucking real magic happen, right? And don't get me wrong, there's some fantastic coaches out there. You got guys like Faraz Sahabi, John Danaher is amazing in what he does. He's not primarily an MMA coach, but even Greg Jackson, also really, really high level coach, messes with the mind. Eric Del Fiero, the coach that I worked under, excellent coach, definitely works a lot with the mind and whatnot. So again, would I have received that at the time? Who knows if I would have received it? I never had the conversation with anybody. I never got really called out in that way. The only person who ever called me out was Dominic himself. And, Dominic and I are really close friends today. We fucking, I won't say we hated each other. We had a hard time coexisting with one another as teammates.
Wars on the mat.
Wars on the mat, and just generally didn't like each other. Really didn't like each other. I was cocky and arrogant, and gym hero, win in the gym. Dom would call me out on it. Hey, you're not going to be the best you can be if you don't work on your weaknesses. And I just couldn't hear him. I could hear him. It just, what he was saying was so foreign to me. My ego was just too fragile. It wasn't until years later that stayed with me, and it wasn't until years later that became the seed in which I started looking at myself through. Like, oh, these weaknesses that I avoid, they actually become anxieties. They become things that I'm actually afraid of because I refuse to confront them. And so I started coaching fighters from that standpoint because I was so familiar with what it's like to train from that fearful ego. I can identify it like that. And so I'd see it and I'd start calling it out. And the only skill in my toolbox at the time was basically putting people in the fire. Like, oh, you're afraid of this? Like, you're going in the fire to whatever you're afraid of. It can be effective. It's not effective for everybody, and it can't be the only tool in your toolbox. So fortunately, I've grown since then and learned how to, you can't have a hammer as the tool for every job. You're eventually going to put some holes in things you don't want to put holes in. So, but yeah, that's how it started. That's what Top Team was all about. Top Team was putting people in the fire.
I mean, back then, I came in 2015 or 16, I think it was, just for a holiday. But Top Team had a great reputation back then for UFC fighters were there, Bisping was there, people would come, it was a great reputation in terms of the level there, and it was the MMA gym, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so wild, to drive down there and see that it's just bushes and trees and stuff now, but yeah, man, we had a great thing going on there for a little bit. It was just a great training environment. I'm so proud of what we built there and just kind of the outflow of that, like even what some guys have gone on to produce with their lives that has nothing to do with fighting,
Let me ask you the story about Mr. Ben Royal.
Yeah.
Because he mentioned you on the podcast saying, he came out here and ultimately gave him an opportunity. How do you see that story? When did you first see Ben? Yeah,
so Ben came to the gym with another guy named Ben that was from New Zealand. And he brought this, goofy kid with him. And I'm training with this kid and I'm getting ready for a fight and I'm beating the piss out of this kid. But he's also giving me a little bit of a hard time, giving me a challenge, and he had a heart. And just something in me, I just saw something in him. I just felt like this kid's got something, and I just liked him. And He stayed with us for a little bit, and towards the end of it, he was there for I don't recall if it was for a couple months or a couple weeks or whatever, but he was with us for long enough for me to kind of take a shine to him. And towards the end of his stay, I said, "Hey, listen, man, if you want to come back here, I'll do whatever I have to do to, make sure that you got free training, and you can make a run at this thing. I think you got something." And if you know anything about Ben's from like a shitty part of Manchester, Gorton, I'm pretty sure is where he's from, Manchester. It's like not a real hopeful place, and I think he wasn't too stoked about I think he was on a bit of a downward trend and spending a lot of times in clubs and just doing things that were not really taking his life in the best trajectory. And we stayed in touch, and the kid made it happen. He said, "All right, I need a little time," and I guess he did whatever he had to do to save enough money and get out here. And when he got out here, he just kind of became my pet project, if you will, and my right hand and anything that I needed. And I'll tell you what, there's like, out of all the fighters that I've ever coached in my life, particularly out here, I think the two guys that I have the closest bond with, that I really like, have a heartfelt attachment to, is Ben and Terry are probably the two guys that I feel the closest to, that I probably put the most time into personally.
Yeah, I mean, both of them. I've had on the podcast. Both of them have mentioned you as well.
Yeah,
so it's definitely a reciprocal relationship.
Yeah. So just see what Ben has created. It's like sometimes it's mind blowing to me. I go to that gym and it's like it hits me every time. But I'm like, this guy. First of all, he's a great fighter, right? If he could keep his, it's a shame that the injuries that he's dealt with, but unbelievable fighter. But he's got a family. He's got a thriving business. Right. So I look at this kid from this fucking shithole part of England, right? It's like he got an opportunity, and I don't take any credit for that. He earned the opportunity. I just saw a kid that had some talent, right? So he comes out here, he makes the most of it, builds a kids program, right?
Yeah. That
kids program he made things happen, So like, even though COVID maybe wasn't ideal at the time, he took, a shitty situation and made something really great happen for himself. And like, that's what this is all about. Like, somebody that can take an opportunity like that and turn it into gold for himself. And that, he's got a good life.
Massively. And, not just, as you said, like, in the cage fighting, which he's still doing, his business is, what I tell people is Ben's business, Phuket Grappling Academy, is it's an example of like organic growth. He started in a shitty blue room. Even to this day, there's not a sign outside PGA.
Right.
Have you noticed? Why haven't you got a sign? Like,
for what?
They don't need it. Look, it's full.
Yeah.
It's 100 people in there on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, it grew organically because of, one, his product. Like, they love his teaching and the way that he teaches, but also like the community that he's built. Right. When COVID happened, they first opened it, PGA Blue Room, like, it was just regulars in there, and it created that community.
Yeah. It's interesting because, Ben leads in a very different way than, we'll say, I lead. I'm quite loud and out front. Ben's leadership is, he really cares, and he's a really nice person, and he'll give you attention. And I think people feel the genuine care from him, right? And he, and he builds upon that, in his very own unique way, and that's also a form of leadership, right? And because like, I look at that gym and I look at the community that gym is based upon, and it's like, Ben is the foundation of that, and the way that he just really cares. Right, the care that he gave to the kids first. So I'd watch him teach that kids class, and he really cared and put so much effort into it, and still does, right? And then you watch just how he built his gym based off that care from his own form of leadership, which I just think is amazing, and I just like to sit back and watch it and appreciate it.
And I mean, I think you could even almost make a movie out of it, like the trials, tribulations he went through, during COVID, and finding another place, going to the big like warehouse now, and where does it go from here? Like it's only been going like 2 years, in the big one, like it really is, like
it's quite cool.
I'm excited to see, and of course, Ben gave me an opportunity with OG. Before we even had anything, he put us on his t-shirt. And I say this in the podcast. I was like, you gave us this opportunity, and he said, just like me, like someone gave me an opportunity once, but you got to take it and run with it.
That's it.
Like someone might open the door for you, but you've got to go and back it up. Of course.
That's it. Yeah.
And, I think a lot of people, get opportunity, but they don't run with it.
Yeah, it's interesting when that happens, right? And I'm like, what is that when somebody takes an opportunity and runs with it versus the people that don't? And I don't know. I think because I'm just sitting here thinking about it, I'm sure there's other possibilities at play, but I think the people that take the opportunity and run with it, I don't think they give themselves a plan B.
Yeah.
Right?
It's all in.
It's all in.
Yeah.
And I think the people that are all in are the ones that like, I'm making this work.
Yeah.
Like whatever the fuck happens.
That's very true. I mean, this resonates a lot with me. On my way here in the traffic, I was talking to my friend in Hong Kong. He's working in the crypto world. He was like, I was telling him, we're opening a juice shop. We're doing a few other business ideas. And he was like, bro, how do you just keep going and like say, I'm going to keep doing this and open this and do that? And, I'm like, well, I've got no fucking choice. Like, I'm all in, and that's why I've got that fire to wake up every day and do it.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're working for somebody else, you kind of, if you have an off day, you're still getting paid the same.
Right.
And you can coast.
100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think people that take opportunities, I don't think anybody's a self-made person. I don't believe in self-made. I think you could be self-motivated, right? Mm-hmm. But I think there's always assistance along the way, right? There's
no one made it on their own.
No, I don't think anybody makes it on their own, like, purely, right? I believe there's self-motivated people out there, but yeah, I think, there's always a choice, but when the choice is there is no choice, right? Mm-hmm. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Then you're going to see those people put that energy into that thing.
I think it's amazing what I read I'm really into, of course, my Instagram algorithm's all like success quotes and, this business stuff. And, one of the quotes that really hit me was like, sometimes like a total stranger could be like kinder to you or to your business than your own family member, for example.
Yeah.
Which is wild as well, because, like, how can that be?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's interesting when you open something and the people that you think are going to support you or where you think the support comes from is oftentimes not where the support comes from, right? And to be honest, it's like you're not going to make a business off your friends, right? You're not going to make a business off your family. You got to create the relationships outside of that. It's great to have a network, my business, my coaching business thrives off the network that I've built. Like, do I make some money off social media? Yeah. But a lot of my business just comes through being a solid guy, having a lot of trust built up with a lot of people, and random interactions turn into client-customer relations, and it just seems to go like that. And and then I get the, occasional DM from somebody that's just interested in something that I've been talking about online and they want to do business,
So tell us a little bit about this, like, coaching that you're doing now.
Yeah, so really from that mustard seed of looking at where I was afraid to confront my fears as a fighter, I started to really kind of turn that into just an overall like life philosophy. And I've always been a guy that's been self-reflective, right? And ask myself questions and ask myself, what I'm avoiding, why I'm avoiding it, what's scary about that to me. And that's what gave me a lot of success as a coach with MMA fighters. I think I'm, sure I have a real high level of technical knowledge, but also if I can help you at least acknowledge, like, hey bro, like, do you see where you're avoiding certain things, or you're avoiding working on certain things, and like getting people to, like, holding people accountable, right? So, and I've always just had that sort of thing built in with people. Like, you put me anywhere and I start talking to somebody, they're gonna start spilling their deepest. It's just like they'll start telling me things, and they're like, "Oh, I can't believe I told you that." So I've always had that thing.
You're a good listener.
I don't even know if I'm a good listener as much as I've seen so much dark shit in my life. I'm not gonna judge anything that you tell me, right? I had to learn how to be a good listener, right? I had to learn how to be a good listener. It wasn't an innate skill for me, but I won't judge you. Like, you could tell me the craziest, weirdest, most depraved thing about you, and I'm not gonna really bat an eye. So there's that, and I'm always gonna shoot you straight. Like, I'm gonna be honest. So I had that going for me, and in my own personal journey, a lot of my demons started to come up when I left Phuket in 2019. I left here really riding a high, right? And I was kind of like, I had built a pretty nice name for myself in the MMA world, and was getting some good notoriety, was coaching all these really big name fighters. And I thought, oh yeah, I'm going to leave here. Somebody's going to throw me a sick coaching offer, because I've had offers to open up gyms in Spain and maybe come out to Dubai. And I was just waiting for the
next big one.
The next big one. The next guy with a fat stack of cash that wanted to invest in some hotshot coach and build a fight team. I wanted somebody else to invest, you know what I mean? And I'll just go do that, because I didn't believe in myself to do the money part. So I go back to America, and I end up in San Diego. I left here riding that high. I had no idea why I was leaving, other than I just felt like I had reached the top of whatever I could do here, right? The limit had been reached. It's time to go somewhere else. No idea why. Leave here, go back to America, still no plan. I'm in New York for a few weeks. I'm going to go to San Diego and check that out. I get to San Diego within a month. I've got a car, an apartment. I'm teaching at Alliance MMA, which I fought for, but I'm assistant coach to my head coach, right? A little bit of a step back, but I'm like, all right, I'm here for a reason. And I start to experience like complex PTSD symptoms are starting to come up. I'm afraid to like be out in like social settings. I'm newly married, right? I'm having to make it work. COVID starts like a couple of months after getting married, and life is getting really hard. So I'm having to deal, and I'm in the midst of, I started writing a memoir, and really revisiting a lot of dark stuff. And so a lot of pain is coming up, and I'm having a real hard time learning how to deal with it. But I stay at it, and I'm reading and researching and just looking for guidance anywhere I can get it. And I started going to these trainings, these emotional intelligence trainings, and a bunch of different types of trainings. And in these trainings, I actually started to learn how to really confront this stuff within myself, right? I started to get a framework to work with that wasn't just throwing yourself into the deep end all the time, right? I started to learn different ways to go about this, more effective ways to go about this. I went through these trainings, then I became a coach in these trainings, and I started coaching people in these trainings, and I started doing all these other trainings, and I recognized this is what I want to do, like serving people at this level, dealing with their, like, the real deep, fearful stuff inside of them that's holding them back. That's what I want to do. That's always been a passion of mine. It's always been a passion of mine to take the risk. Like,
What do you mean by like? I mean, I'm just asking for myself
Sure.
here, actually. Like, you know, obviously I've been through some deep and, you know, emotional experiences too in my life, and like, what do you mean by like to kind of like to go back and experience it and to solve it and to like, you know, because a lot of people just shut bad experiences away,
Sure.
right? Because you want to focus on the good, not the
Right.
bad, right? And I think I'm pretty much like that as well. I just get on with my life,
Right.
But like, is there one day where it's all just gonna like pile back up and just hit me in the face, being like, you didn't deal with this for the last 34 years?
How old are you?
35.
Okay. So this is just my experience, right? Observationally and personally. I thought I had gotten over all this stuff too. I told stories about all these painful things hundreds of times. Laugh about it, right? Then I'm starting to experience this stuff in a different way. Now it's not always like for a guy like you, it might not be just remembering these things and the pain all of a sudden comes back, but you know, you may start realizing, oh man, I'm having a hard time with romantic relationships, right? I'm having a hard time just being with myself, right? Maybe I start to notice like, oh, I'm regularly anxious, or I never feel like I can just be at ease. I always feel like I have to be going on to the next thing, right? Could be all these things. I don't know enough about you personally to say for sure, but this is stuff that people happens, and it starts to be like, man, they start to just feel unsettled with certain components of their life, okay? And wherever a person is being blocked in their life, I can invariably attach it to a belief system that they have, right? That's tied to some early experiences that they have in their life. Now, if they want to have a different experience of we'll say the belief system that's holding them back, right? I don't know, some people are not good with money, right? They're like, they don't believe. I was one of those people. I never thought I could make money. Right? I always wanted somebody else to finance my dreams, right? Because I had a belief that I'm a poor person, right? Mm-hmm. And the answer in my family, whenever I wanted to put money into something, was no. It's too expensive. We can't afford it, you know? So those are the beliefs that I had around money, right? And so until I got to go inside and actually confront these beliefs, right? And start to work through them in real time. Start to see where I was not taking action because I was afraid to confront the idea that it felt scary to invest in myself, right? The initial investment I made to go to a training, which a friend paid for, was like, but you got to put $300 of your own money in. That $300 felt terrifying. $300. That's so much. Right now I spend tens of thousands of dollars on investments, right? Personal investments to gain skills for myself.
Question. In terms of like, you know, looking inside and kind of trying to see like what problems I can solve that will improve my life today. Uh-huh. Having worked, you know, in this life coaching space with a number of fighters as well, right?
Yep.
Is there any like common fear that these fighters have that comes up more than, you know, others?
I mean, a lot of it. So, a lot of our fears, fighters or not, are pretty much the same, right? A lot of fighters build their esteem on the fact that they can fight, right? Not dissimilar to what I described earlier. So it's like, are people still going to love me if I don't win? Right? Am I going to like myself if I don't win? Then they win, right? And then they're happy, they're high, and then they come down from the high and then they're like, that was it. Because they put so much weight on the win,
yeah.
Right? That once I win, then it's going to be awesome. So like the reward is in the destination instead of the journey, right? The most fulfilled and happy people I know enjoy the whole ride, mm-hmm. Right? Yes, they want to win. But the illusion that I'm going to be happier once I win or life's going to be better somehow once I win is generally not true. A lot of people get depressed after fights, whether they win or lose. There's this big emotional high and then a crash. Well, now what?
And for that, 15, 25 minutes.
Yeah.
You're the man.
You're the man. And then, maybe even the night after.
Yeah.
And then a couple days after, and there's often a crash, right? And a lot of these fighters, man, a lot of them, they got stuff going on other than that. They've been through abuse. They've come, emotionally neglectful families and all that type of stuff, man. So they got a bunch of that shit going on. And it's like, why do you think some of these guys stay in the game so long? They got nothing else. They don't know who they are without that. Their whole identity gets tied up into fighting. I remember my whole identity was tied up into fighting. Yeah. I didn't know who I was outside of that. I had no intrinsic value outside of that, right? So think about the pressure that puts on somebody, right? Think about the pressure you might have. Like, you're Jim, the business guy. What if all of a sudden business started going rough, God forbid? Well, now who am I? All this thing I thought I had a handle on, and it's like, or what if you you're the guy that gives opportunities now, and and it's like, and then, well, what if I can't do that anymore? Or what if it changes? Or, it's like, will I be able to look at myself the same? What kind of fears will come up for me around that? Mm-hmm. Right? So if you want to know where to look at the thing that you avoid looking at the most, right? It's like, whatever part of your life brings the most anxiety to even think about or look, or you just, I don't even want to deal with that. That would be my invitation for that person to start looking there. Because it's like, what you resist persists, first of all, right? And that, like, the areas of myself that I'm the most afraid to look at will probably tell me the most about myself.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I can definitely agree with that,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking off the top of my head, like,
yeah.
It's, how can we, help fighters, in this day and age? Like, there isn't too much. Well, firstly, a young fighter thinks he's, the planet's next gift that was going to be the next UFC champion, right? Who, most of 99% of the time, probably they all think that they're mentally, granite, especially on the come up, when they're still young, fresh, and, but obviously they're not. And, having, help like this, I know it's, what's the word? Like, how could we influence or change, or it's education really at the end of the day?
Yeah, education and awareness, I think, is a huge thing. So, one thing, man, I see this all the time. Even, I'm working with fighters at Tiger right now, and they've got some amazing fighters down there. And so often, guys are using practice as the fight. And there's times to do that, right? But if you want to build skills, you can't just be going to your A game all the time, right? So you've got to put aside winning now in the short term to develop skills, which means sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it's going to not. You're going to have some rough days if you're building a new skill.
Yeah. Right?
You've got to be like, that takes that level of awareness that I'm going to suck at this today so that I can be great tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right?
But the problem is, the only reason why I am here on a Tiger mat is because I've kicked everyone's ass out.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So it's just, I think, like, that, just that's a basic sort of premise to work with, right? Is, and understanding when there's the time for something, because some days I need you to go out there and work your A game, right? So it's having a watchful eye. It's being able to take the coaching, right? Take the coaching. Sometimes I'll coach a guy, I'll walk up to a guy and say, I want to see you do a little bit more of this, and they'll start giving me the excuse of why they're not. I don't ever want to hear the excuse. Like, if you have questions or concerns, I want to hear that. But, like, for me, ideally, when you're being coached, you don't need to defend yourself, right? Take the coaching. Take the coaching. Yes, sir, is the appropriate answer. And if we need to have a dialogue about it, or there's something you don't understand, or I'm having trouble executing that, or whatnot, I'm happy to have that dialogue, right? Mm-hmm. What I don't want to hear is you defend
why you're doing it wrong.
Why you're doing it in a way that's not working. Mm-hmm. Right. And obviously, I'll have some flex on that. It is a little bit of a peeve of mine. But, yeah, I think just, like, having a healthier attitude towards growth. Now, that being said, there's a lot of guys out there that have become great because they hate losing and they hate making mistakes. And maybe they have a terrible attitude towards making mistakes. Do I think they're going to be happy people even though they'll have a great career? My general experience with that is no, right? I know you can do great things and not have a great life.
Yep.
Right? Now, is it for me to tell you that you should want a great life? No, it's not for me to tell you, right? Some people have to learn that. Some people have to have a not great life, right? They have to have a hard, unpleasant life, and they've done great things. And maybe that's the life that they choose, and that's fine. What I'm kind of here to do is, because it's not just about winning fights for me either. I really believe martial arts, as I practice it, is a vehicle for self-improvement.
100%.
Right? And so that's the only way I will coach. I'm not interested. I'm not the coach for you if you just want to win fights and you don't want to use this to look at yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. I just don't really have an interest in that.
Hey, one thing I do want to ask, just randomly,
sure.
You're obviously dealing with people's fighters' psychological, welfare, and having been in the game for so long, do you believe this kind of like CTE thing has a big effect on like people's psychology and stuff?
I've got some friends that I wish would get out of the fight game.
Yeah.
And even guys that are out of the fight game now but just hung in there a little bit too long, and they start to slow down and their speech is slurred and they almost take on like a juvenile quality to them. Like it's they're just not quite as sharp, and there's almost like a childlikeness that comes over them from the blows that they've taken to the head. And it's hard. It's hard seeing somebody that you knew to be something different, or someone different.
Like, you used to be such a strong weapon.
Yeah,
human, right?
and just to see what the fight game has done to them. Yeah.
Anything to kind of elude that or get away from that. Do you, for example, in your MMA, do you think that people should be using head guards and stuff like that? Or?
Well, yeah, I think the gym wars, it's more, can fights do it? Yeah, sure. Some guys have been in fights that you're just never going to be the same after a fight like that, right?
But a lot of these brain cells are being lost in the gym.
A lot of them being lost in the gym, and I think the gym wars are unnecessary. I don't think they're the way you get the best either, man. I don't think it's how you draw the most out of yourself. I think, look, martial arts just in and of itself has a stressful nature to it, right? When we're actually practicing and sparring, even jiu-jitsu, right, can have a stressful nature to it. All right, we'll say even minus the head trauma, right? There's not a lot of head trauma in jiu-jitsu mostly. If all I'm doing is going hard every day, my game starts to get tight, right? I'm not opening up the same way, right? If all I'm doing is the hard rounds all day, I'm not building skill, I'm just getting tough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, a lot of people largely accept now, like a lot of your skill development should be building those skills on guys that you have a skill advantage over. So you want to get rounds with guys that you have a skill advantage over more often than not when you're building skills. Now, this also depends whether you're in camp or not in camp, right? So I think like having lower intensity rounds more often is a great way to get more volume with less wear and tear and ultimately more skill development. So even technical sparring, that doesn't mean we have to like tap spar, even though there's utility to touch sparring. There's also utility to like pulling our punches a little bit. And then, every now and then we also got to just, I think when you're young, you need to learn how to take a shot. You need to learn what it's like to be in a fight and to have somebody, you got to also build the nervous system awareness to do that. If that's all you do, I don't think that's good though. I don't think it's good to only spar hard. I think it's only good. And I'm, I'm from the school of fight to the death, bro. Like we were trying to sleep each other in training. If I could knock you out in training, 100% was I going to knock you out. 100%. Not even a question.
I have a question about like mindset in the fight, right?
Uh-huh.
If you're coaching a fighter in the fight, from my limited experience in competing jiu-jitsu, after the 5th, 6th time, I went in there very cool, calm, and just trying to execute my techniques. Whereas like in MMA, you're gonna get punched in the face as well. To me, there's an element of that like fight or flight. Like you can't just keep cool and just try and look for your shots. Is there like?
Well, I don't think it's any different to. So think about your first jiu-jitsu tournament.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about it.
I just ran at the guy thinking it was rugby.
Okay. So that sounds like a fight or flight response.
And then like the adrenaline in my arms.
Okay. So there you go. The adrenaline, all that. Exactly. Okay. So, and then you had to compete a few times in order to go in there a little bit more tactical.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't really see it as much different for fighting.
Similar style.
Similar. Yeah. Are the stakes different? Yeah. You could definitely get more hurt in a fight than you can generally on par with jiu-jitsu, right? Jiu-jitsu, because of the tapping element, it seems to be a bit safer.
Yeah, I just feel MMA would be, I would be more emotional into it because...
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of guys are. So, look, it's all the meaning that we put behind it, right? It's like a little bit different losing a grappling match than it is losing a fight.
Yeah.
Right? You lose a fight, like, oh, this guy beat my ass.
Yeah.
Right? In front of all these people, right? And for some people, it's the same losing a grappling match. I think a lot of what adds to the stress is, one is going to be lack of familiarity with competing, right? Two is going to be the meaning that you put into this. So for me, it was stressful because part of the meaning that I added to it was my lovability as a human being is dependent upon whether I win or lose. Okay. Now, do you think my experience is going to be different if that's not on the table? If I'm okay with myself, if I'm okay, I know that all my friends and family love me and I'm still worthy as a human being whether I win or lose. Do you think my experience of the fight is going to be different based with that belief in play or not in play? Or do you think it'll be the same no matter what?
I don't think it would be different.
It'll be different. 100% it'll be different. Yeah. Because my belief about it is different. Right? And so there's not a right belief system to have. Okay? But what we do want to look at is what are your belief systems and what is the result that you're currently getting from the belief systems that you have. Right? So I'm working with a pretty high level fighter right now, and I'll leave his name out of it, but I've been encouraging him to go for submissions and training and like ground and pound and get on top of guys a little bit more. And he's just like, I just don't believe in it. But I'm watching him in training. He has the capability to do it, right? I think he so identified himself as a striker, right? So his belief is I'm a striker.
He's put himself in that box.
He's put himself in a box because he doesn't believe that he's also that, even though I watch him do it to good guys.
Yeah.
Right? So what you believe will very much dictate your experience, right? Look, you could have the best belief systems in the world and still lose, right? You could have the best training camp in the world and still lose. All this stuff does is give you the best shot possible, right? To have the best expression of yourself possible, right? So it's like, do I want to go in there and enjoy this process? Do I want to go in there and get the most out of myself? Okay. Are my current belief systems allowing me to do so? Or am I being held back in some way? Do I feel tight when I go in there? Why? Right? And we want to look at the belief systems. And we could take that into any area of life that you want to talk about, right? Your belief systems literally create the experience that you have in any given thing.
That's very interesting perspective and insight as well into you know, what you're doing with your athletes and how
Yeah.
you work with them and how you get inside basically.
So I don't know if you're in a relationship or single or whatnot, but let's assume you've been single at some point in your life, and you know, you ever have where you go on a drought with women, right? You start to kind of get a little bit down on yourself, and it seems harder and harder, and then maybe you get on a bit of a streak, right? Notice how you feel about yourself when you're on a bit of a streak. It almost seems effortless, right? What's the difference?
Just confidence.
What
Mentally.
I believe about myself. My belief changes. The experience starts to change. I start to carry myself a little bit differently based off the belief.
And it is that sensitive to a fighter going into battle.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Their belief is going to reflect how they carry themselves.
Awesome.
Yeah. And that's true in anything. Any business, whatever, right? You're taking the risks now. Like, think about the risks you're taking now. It's like, would I have taken these risks in the beginning? Or did I have my beliefs, have I built up these belief systems as I've gotten to experience myself do the hard thing, right? Now you probably look at yourself differently as a businessman than you did when you started.
Yeah.
Right? And so things that maybe would have, really threw you through a loop a couple of years ago, maybe not so much anymore.
For sure.
Right? Because your beliefs have changed.
Also,
and the experience. The experience can...
3 years in jiu-jitsu is completely different now,
absolutely.
That's very awesome perspective, man. And just before we kind of finish it off here,
sure.
If anyone, athletes are looking or are watching the podcast, how can they potentially work with you, or how
sure.
can that work?
So anybody, I actually don't even coach fighters really much anymore. I'm pretty much retired from the fight game. I just but I'll work with. I generally work with professionals, like guys that own businesses or women that own businesses or people that are successful in a given field, but they're running into some personal problems. But anybody that's interested in work, most fighters, I'm a little bit outside of their financial bracket, especially if they're coming up. But I answer questions in my DMs all the time. So if a fighter wants to just talk to me and ask me questions, I'm happy to just help people out. You know what I mean? Hit me up on Instagram, shoot me a DM. I'll check it at some point, my inbox, and I'll pretty much always answer. It may take me a couple days, but I'll pretty much always answer young fighters' questions or any fighters' questions, about anything that they got going on or anyway. Yeah, it's I'm so blessed and I live a good life and have a nice career doing what I'm doing. And I hate just because somebody can't afford to work with me one-on-one doesn't mean that I want to not be able to serve these people or serve anybody and answer a fucking question. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's very kind of you to even just offer that. I know a lot of people wouldn't. So
yeah. No, I think it's important, man, because it's I don't know. I never know where inspiration's gonna come from, and you never know what maybe I answer this guy's question and maybe he goes and talks to somebody and that person ends up hitting me up to do some actual business, and it all works out in the end. I think it's just
sure.
I think it's just really important to be kind and give as much as you can.
I think as well, it's great to hear it from somebody that kind of, you're definitely a few generations before me in this place here, Phuket, right? And you're recognized for that. You were Ben's coach once. Now look at Ben is on this island.
Yeah. It's wild.
You come here for a holiday. You're the guest coach at Tiger Muay Thai, and they're so grateful to have you there. So for you to have your door open, to be able to be accessible as well, I think a lot of people appreciate that. So
I get a kick. I like talking to people, man. I do. I really like talking to people, and it's funny. If I'm walking out, I don't just. Sometimes because I look like I just got out of jail, people are a little apprehensive to just come talk to me, but I really enjoy having conversations. If people come up and ask me if I could be eating lunch by myself and somebody comes up and asks me a question, or sometimes I'll have people recognize me from Instagram, be oh, I like your content, and I welcome those conversations because I just do like talking to people. I think people are so interesting, and we've all got kind of our own little worlds going on, and I think it's just cool to to be able to, I don't know, cross paths and share with each other whatever we can share with each other.
Awesome, man. And I don't see too many kind of like MMA ex-fighters, coaches that have gone down your pathway of being like a life coach and being the open door that of course you've made business from it, but at the end of the day, like you said, this came from facing your fears, and trying to like change other people's fears, and it comes from the heart, right? And that's why you've been a success. Like,
I really think so what am I selling? I'm selling my journey, right? And so I got to be true to that journey if I'm gonna be walking other people through that path.
Sure.
Right. So and I think that's a part of it. And I think it's like, man, if you don't love what you're doing, like to do this, I feel like you got to love it. You got to be obsessed with it. This is all I do pretty much is have these types of conversations all day long. I really love it. I don't know really how to have any other type of conversations. So.
Well, I'm glad you came down and had a conversation with me.
Cheers. Likewise.
Much appreciated. And all the best for what's to come. And I'm sure you're going to be back in Phuket at some point.
At some point, absolutely.
And but for now, I wish you all the best in your recovery.
All right. Cheers, bro. Thank you.
Got his appendix taken out and came on 2 days later. That's much appreciated. So let's do it. You're Eric Uresk?
Yes.
OG of the Soy. Let's go. Thank you, brother. Cool. Much appreciated.